Fellas, considering we just saw Sean O'Malley lose his belt to Merab and the bantamweight division has had a lot of big fights recently, I thought it's the perfect time to matchmake the entire bantamweight rankings, the bantamweight division. Considering there's only like 4 bantamweights right now that actually have fights booked, and there's just a lot of fights to make, especially after UFC 306. So we're going to be matchmaking the UFC bantamweight division into fights that I think make the most sense, and just fights that I think would be fun, and like I said, just make the most sense. So we'll start off with the champion Merab, the new crowned champion after UFC 306. Obviously just went out there, got a really impressive win over Sean O'Malley, became a champion. I'm pretty sure he was the underdog. I'm not sure about the betting lines, but I think he was the underdog as well. So a good win for Merab. Now, who does the champion face next? I think there's only one name. It's not rocket science to make this fight, and it's him versus Umar Nurmagomedov. Now, funnily enough, he actually kind of rejected the offer of Umar Nurmagomedov in his post-fight speech. I'm not saying he's ducking Umar, but he didn't really look like he was that interested in Umar Nurmagomedov. But I don't really think it matters who he's interested in. I think the UFC are going to push this fight next anyway, because Umar Nurmagomedov, obviously, he's deserved his shot at the belt. I mean, even though he might not have the longest list of opponents, that fight with Corey Sandhagen was kind of being hyped up as like the #1 contender fight. The winner gets a title shot, and he went out there and had a really, really impressive performance against Corey Sandhagen. And like I said, even though he might not have this big list of opponents, I think that win over Sandhagen alone was enough to grant him a title shot. I mean, that was at least what Dana White was saying. So I think we do Umar Nurmagomedov versus Merab, and I actually really like this fight for multiple reasons. I mean, we kind of getting a break from the whole grappler versus striker fight in the bantamweight division. Obviously, we had Umar and Sandhagen, we had Merab and O'Malley. I feel like it's finally good to be having a grappler versus a grappler. Two of the most high-level grapplers in the bantamweight division going at it. Two kind of unstoppable forces when it comes to grappling in the bantamweight division going at it. So I think stylistically, this is going to be a really intriguing fight to see for the belt. And it's a really dangerous fight for Merab as well. I think that Umar Nurmagomedov is the most dangerous fight in the division for Merab. And I think this is kind of like a make or break, where if he can beat Umar, I don't see anybody beating Merab in the bantamweight division. But yeah, I mean, you look at Merab and what he's been doing recently. I mean, he's had so many good performances. That dominating performance against PTN, that was just setting records on PTN in that fight. It was so dominant. Does the same thing to Henry Cejudo in his next fight. A wrestler as good as Henry Cejudo dominates him. And then in his last fight at UFC 306, had a really impressive performance against Sean O'Malley. He just keeps having good performances. And then you've got Umar Nurmagomedov on the other end, got a brutal KO over Barcelos. And I think he does have much better hands than Merab as well, which isn't really hard to see. Went out there and dominated Bekzat. Fair enough, it was a debutant, but he still debuted him in that fight. Did a really good job at mixing up the wrestling. And most importantly, in his last fight, went out there and beat Corey Sandhagen across 5 rounds, which was definitely by far his most impressive performance in that main event. So I think it is the fight to make next, Merab versus Nurmagomedov. And like I said, I know that Merab's kind of been focusing on Davis and Figueiredo. And don't get me wrong, Figueiredo is a top contender, and I wouldn't mind him as a backup. But if we're talking who's actually next for Merab, I think it's got to be Umar Nurmagomedov. I think this is the fight to make next in the bantamweight division. It's very intriguing. It's the perfect fight to make. And again, I just want to see how Merab is going to handle a guy as good as Umar Nurmagomedov, who's undefeated, who's got that Nurmagomedov last name, who trains with a tough team, who has good hands, and most importantly, has the wrestling to back it up. And I feel it is a make or break fight for Merab. So Merab, Nurmagomedov, I think it should be next for the belt. I don't exactly know when, but just sometime next year, maybe late this year. It's probably not going to be this year, is it? So probably next year, Merab, Umar Nurmagomedov for the bantamweight belt. It makes the most sense. And then for Sean O'Malley, the guy who just unfortunately lost his belt, fell short, former champion. Now, for Sean O'Malley, I think he is going to be out for quite a bit. Not necessarily because he's injured or anything, but I just think he's going to be training. He's going to be changing his game plan up a bit. He's going to be, not capitalizing, but changing his mistakes around, looking at what he did wrong, working on it. So I don't expect him to be back this year. He's probably going to be out for quite a bit. But I think, again, for Sean O'Malley, there's one opponent that stands out perfectly for his comeback fight in the bantamweight division, and it's Corey Sandhagen. It's the perfect time to make O'Malley versus Sandhagen. And you might be thinking that, this is a very dangerous fight for O'Malley to be having a comeback against, but they're both in the same position. They were both on winning streaks, and they both ended up losing by decision to the next big thing when it came to wrestling in the bantamweight division. Obviously, O'Malley to Merab and Sandhagen to Umar Nurmagomedov. So they're both in a very similar position. They're both, kind of one fight away from getting back in that title picture. But it's the fight to make. O'Malley versus Sandhagen. This is the highest level fight you can make in the bantamweight division if it isn't for the belt. It's the fight that we've all been waiting for. It's kind of been a fantasy fight in the bantamweight division, but we've never really had the opportunity to see it. And I think most people expected to see this for a belt. But let's see it for like a co-main event of a pay-per-view, a 5-round co-main event. O'Malley versus Sandhagen, one of the most high-level fights you can make, and arguably the most interesting fight you can make right now, at least from an entertainment standpoint, from the bantamweight division. And they're so evenly matched as well. I'd say O'Malley probably has the crisper striking out of the two of them. Even though Sandhagen's a great striker, I'd say O'Malley's a little bit more crisp, but Sandhagen's definitely the better grappler, and I think it's going to be interesting to see if and how Sandhagen's going to mix it up against O'Malley. And again, the winner of this fight, I mean, you've got O'Malley and Sandhagen. The winner of this fight can just be chucked back into a #1 contender fight if they win against the likes of Yan, Figueiredo, Umar, and Merab. Because obviously, Sean O'Malley, he's a former champion. If he can beat Corey Sandhagen, obviously he's going to be straight back in the title picture. And same for Sandhagen. He's got such a good resume. If he can beat former champion Sean O'Malley, get him another #1 contender fight. Who says no? Sean O'Malley, Corey Sandhagen, quite possibly one of the most entertaining fights you can make right now in the bantamweight division. Have this on for a co-main event of a pay-per-view next year. I don't think anyone's complaining. It's the perfect time to make it. We've always been kind of fantasying this matchup, and now it's the perfect time to make it now that Sean O'Malley's lost to Merab. O'Malley, Sandhagen, let's see this fight. And then for Yan, ranked number 3 in the division, he's had a bit of a shaky past few fights as Yan, obviously. Lost a very questionable decision to Aljamain Sterling, lost a very questionable decision to Sean O'Malley, got dominated by Merab, but he's now the champion, and then beat Song Yadong. So his past couple of fights, I do think he's been done dirty in a few of them, and I think he should be put in a #1 contender fight immediately. And even though you might be thinking he's lost most of his recent fights, you can't remember, this dude is beating Corey Sandhagen. Like I said, one of the top bantamweights in the world. He's beaten the likes of Jose Aldo as well. And most importantly, he's a former champion of the bantamweight division. And I think he got done dirty in those fights with Aljamain Sterling. So I think Yan should be, he should be deserving of at least a #1 contender fight at this moment in time. And I think there's no other opponent than him versus Deiveson Figueiredo. I mean, Deiveson Figueiredo has definitely earned his shot. I think they're both in that same position where they're both one fight away from a title shot. They've both been looking great recently. Even Merab wants to fight Figueiredo, which just shows his position of the bantamweight division. You look at Deiveson Figueiredo, his move to the bantamweight division has been amazing. He debuted in the bantamweight division when he fought Rob Font, had a really impressive performance last year, beat Rob Font comfortably. Then he goes and chokes out Cody Garbrandt at UFC 300, which was also impressive. And then most importantly, at UFC Abu Dhabi, goes out there and dominates don't dominate, but he gets a comfortable win over Marlon Vera as well, which is definitely his best win in the bantamweight division. And that's not even talking about the flyweight division, the flyweight career that this guy had, beating the likes of Pantoja, and most importantly, being a former champion in the flyweight division, a multiple-time former champion. You've got 2 former champions, 2 guys who are one fight away from a title shot, 2 guys who wouldn't be mad at fighting each other. It's a very kind of evenly matched fight as well. They're both really good grapplers. Obviously, Yan with the wrestling, Figueiredo with the jiu-jitsu. Both good strikers as well. I think it's the perfect time to make Yan versus Deiveson Figueiredo. 2 guys who are legends in their own right, and the winner of this fight, give them a title shot against the winner of Merab and Nurmagomedov. I think this could easily be on like a pay-per-view, maybe a really stacked fight night main event, because I know the UFC like doing really stacked fight nights. So maybe if the UFC are planning on doing a stacked fight night next year, or maybe even later this year, to be honest, Yan versus Figueiredo could be that fight. So Yan, Deiveson Figueiredo, #1 contender fight. Again, it's a fun fight. Winner gets a title shot. Who says no? Then for Henry Cejudo, I think for Henry Cejudo, he should be put against the winner of Jose Aldo and Mario Bautista. I know he's kind of been hinting about moving weight classes down to flyweight or potentially up to featherweight. First, get featherweight out of your mind. Pretty much everyone in the top 10 of the featherweight division would absolutely maul Henry Cejudo. That is not safe for Cejudo, and I just can't really see him making flyweight again. I don't know if he's disciplined, and I don't know if he's just able to make that division again. So I think staying in the bantamweight is the correct decision, and I think he should be put against the winner of Jose Aldo and Mario Bautista. Or really, I think he should be put against Jose Aldo. I think that should have been the fight they made after Aldo and Martinez, but obviously it's a bit too late now. They announced that Jose Aldo is going to be taking on Mario Bautista for UFC 307, so I think the winner of that fight should face Henry Cejudo. Cejudo needs to get away from the title picture. I mean, he came back to the bantamweight division after having a good career, got beaten comfortably by Aljamain Sterling for the belt, then he got dominated by Merab in his next fight. So I think the title picture as of right now is a bit of a no-go for Cejudo, and it's time to let somebody else lower ranked, get the opportunity to fight Cejudo, which is why I think he should fight the winner of Aldo and Bautista. I mean, if Jose Aldo can beat Mario Bautista, the winner of Aldo and Cejudo is straight back into a #1 contender fight with guys like I said, O'Malley, Cejudo, Yan, Figueiredo, Umar, Merab. The winner of that fight is going to be straight into a #1 contender fight, and I think it's a very high-level fight as well. And most importantly, it's 2 legends going at it. They've been booked before, it fell short, but you've got 2 legends in their own rights going at it against each other. 2 guys who, yes, they might be past their prime and they might be getting older in age, but it's 2 legends going at it, 2 very high-skilled people, 2 of the greatest in their own right. Obviously, Aldo, arguably the greatest featherweight of all time. Cejudo, one of the greatest combat sports athletes of all time, and he held 2 belts at the same time as well. So you've got 2 legends in the UFC going at it, and I feel like it's the perfect time to do it. And if Cejudo is going to retire, which he has been hinting towards, there's no better time to retire than doing it against another legend in a legacy fight against Jose Aldo. You don't want to retire months after getting dominated by Merab. If you are going to retire, doing it against a legend, against like Jose Aldo in your final fight is probably the perfect time to do it. So I think Cejudo versus Aldo, and if Martinez does manage to beat Jose Aldo, then at least Martinez would have made his name by beating a legend in Jose Aldo, and you can kind of sell that fight as, you know, Martinez has beaten a legend in Aldo. Now he wants to beat another legend in Henry Cejudo. So I think either way, Cejudo should fight the winner of Jose Aldo and Mario Bautista sometime next year, because obviously that fight's taking place at UFC 307. And I think that makes no more sense for Cejudo. Get away from the title picture, get away from the killers at the minute, and fight the winner of Aldo and Bautista. And if you lose that fight, I think, yeah, definitely retire at that point. Then for Marlon Vera, I've said this before, Marlon Vera was so overrated leading up to his fights with O'Malley. Look at the amount of ranked bantamweights this dude has lost to. He lost to O'Malley, Figueiredo, Aldo, Sandhagen, Song Yadong. He's lost to so many ranked bantamweights to the point where, why has this dude got so much hype? And it's not even the losses. Look at these ranked wins. He's only ranked wins right now in the bantamweight division. He's Dominic Cruz, who hasn't fought since 2022 when he fought obviously Vera, and Rob Font. Those are his only wins. And even though I know they're great, especially Dominic Cruz, and they are good in their own right, at the minute, they aren't top bantamweights. And if you look at the current state of the bantamweight division, he shouldn't be fighting anyone ranked above him, considering he's lost to like 3 people ranked above him, and he's on a 2-fight losing streak, so it doesn't make sense. So I think the only fight there really is for him now is a rematch against Song Yadong. I think Vera versus Song Yadong 2, 5 rounds, fight night main event in the Apex. I don't really know if it has to be in the Apex, just a fight night main event between him and Song Yadong, I think makes the more sense in a rematch. They have fought a few years ago. Ironically, Song Yadong was able to beat him, but it was a bit of a close decision, but it was a bit of a questionable decision, which is why I think running it back isn't the worst idea. And Song Yadong's also in a very similar position where he's not a top bantamweight right now. He lost to PTN recently at UFC 299. He lost to Corey Sandhagen. I know he got injured, but he lost it. Well, it was a doctor stoppage, but he lost to Corey Sandhagen. He even lost to Kyler Phillips, who's now on his come up in the bantamweight division. So I think doing Vera versus Yadong the second time, running it back, it's the perfect time to do it. And I think even more, it could actually be quite an entertaining fight. Listen, they're both in that same position where they're not going to ever fight for a belt. They're not going to be a top contender, but they are going to stay in the top 10. And I think you should just use them for fun fights. And I think this would be a fun fight. You've got Marlon Vera, a guy who gets progressively dangerous, a really good kickboxer, has a lot of flaws in his game, doesn't have the highest output, but he is dangerous, against arguably the most powerful guy in the bantamweight division, the most powerful hands in Song Yadong. I don't see this being a boring fight if you do it 5 rounds for a main event. It kind of reminds me of Marcin Tybura versus Sergey Spivak, but for the bantamweight division, in the sense that they're two kind of guys in the bantamweight division who aren't top contenders, but they're kind of good enough to make it into the top 10. So you just match them against each other in a rematch. Vera, Yadong number 2, fight night main event. I think it's what they both deserve. They don't really deserve anything above that. And then talking of Dominic Cruz. Now, for Dominic Cruz, it's a bit hard to matchmake him because I don't know when he's coming back. He hasn't fought since all the way back in August 2022 when he did get knocked out by Marlon Vera, but he has been hinting a return in 2024. But considering we're now in September of 2024 and he still hasn't got a fight booked for the rest of the year, I think it's safe to say he's probably not going to come back this year. But if he is going to come back, Dominic Cruz, and I to matchmaking him to a certain fight as we speak, I think the fight that he should be in next is Chris Gutierrez, or at least one of these unranked bantamweights, because you look at the current state of the bantamweight division, he's ranked number 14th, and I know he's the greatest bantamweight of all time, but he got KO'd in his last fight. That was 2 years ago, so I don't think he necessarily deserves to fight somebody ranked above him, at least not with a win. So I think him versus Chris Gutierrez should be the fight that they make next. Chris Gutierrez, he's done pretty well. He's a pretty good striker as well. He's doing his thing outside the bantamweight rankings, and he won his last fight as well, so it doesn't really, it's not like it's unfair to give him a ranked fighter. So I think we do Chris Gutierrez versus Dominic Cruz as well. And again, it's not like Chris Gutierrez, it's not like we're feeding Cruz to a killer. Chris Gutierrez isn't an absolute killer. He lost to Song Yadong. He even lost to Pedro Munoz a couple of months ago, and Pedro, not months ago, but a couple of years ago, and Pedro Munoz isn't even ranked in the bantamweight division. So it's not like we're feeding him to an absolute killer. And on top of that, like I said, Aldo Cruz is the greatest bantamweight of all time. This dude has been there, held the t-shirt. It's not like he's necessarily old and, well, he is old and past his prime, but it's not like he's necessarily washed, because we don't really know that. You got to remember, in that fight against Marlon Vera, he was kind of piecing him up. So I think we do him versus Chris Gutierrez, but you can even flip that around. Chris Gutierrez, he's already beaten a legend in Frankie Edgar. He retired the legend of Frankie Edgar. If he can do that as well to Dominic Cruz, he's going to start building up a reputation of being like the legend killer. So Dominic Cruz, Chris Gutierrez, I think that's probably probably the only fight that really makes sense for Dominic Cruz. I know when you think of Dominic Cruz, you want to put him in exciting fights against guys like Garbrandt in a rematch, or these, you know, these flashy bantamweights. But if we're talking at the current state of the bantamweight division, he doesn't really get to fight anyone ranked above him, considering the bantamweight division is super competitive and he's coming off a loss and he's been out for years. So I think we do kind of a warm-up fight, same to how we did Aldo versus Martinez. Dominic Cruz versus Chris Gutierrez. If he can pass the test and beat Gutierrez, fair enough, give him another ranked bantamweight. But if he can't, yeah, that's where you pack the bags in and retire. And then for Jonathan Martinez, obviously in his last fight, got beaten by Jose Aldo, which is no shame because Aldo is a legend and it was in enemy territory. So for Jonathan Martinez, well, you got to remember as well, Martinez is quite underrated. I've kind of seen him as a bit of a dark horse of the bantamweight division, because obviously he went out there and had that really impressive performance against Adrian Yanez, who obviously at the time had lost to Rob Font, but he absolutely destroyed his legs in that fight, got the finish, and he also beat Said Nurmagomedov, so he's definitely earned his shot in the rankings, and he knocked out Cub Swanson as well. So I think for Jonathan Martinez, we do him versus Montel Jackson. Montel Jackson's on a bit of a streak. His last fight ended in 18 seconds. 3 of his last 5 have ended in first round knockout in his favor. Like I said, he won his last fight in 18 seconds, and obviously I think it's the perfect fight to make on the feet because I think it's just a really fun fight. You've got 2 high-level dangerous strikers. You've got Jonathan Martinez, a guy who's technical, but a guy who knows how to make a fight dangerous, a guy who knows how to set up big shots, and that's why he's so dangerous in the bantamweight division against Montel Jackson, this guy who's on his come-up, sleeping people. I think it's the perfect time to do Jonathan Martinez versus Montel Jackson in the bantamweight division. The winner of this fight can maybe even get somebody in the top 10. If not, they can get somebody higher ranked, maybe like, I don't know, Rob Font or Kyler Phillips or names like that. So I think we do Jonathan Martinez versus Montel Jackson next in the bantamweight division for both of them. Actually, I know Martinez, I think he has a fight booked. I forgot who he's against, but I think Jonathan Martinez has a fight booked, but I would rather see him against Montel Jackson at this moment in time, to be honest. So that is how I would matchmake the bantamweight division based on fights that I think will be the most entertaining, fights that I want to see next. Let me know your thoughts on these fights. Thank you for watching.